This is your last chance. After this...
Or should we not follow the advice of the galactically stupid?
That is a nice boulder.
Ludicrous speed! Go!
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you pre-recorded from two undersized apartments in New York City, it's Revenge of the Film Nerds.
There, we're in a tight spot.
I hate when people talk during the movie.
With your hosts, Black Crystal.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
And Jack Manley.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
A podcast for nerds by nerds.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Failure is not an option.
And now, here are your hosts, Black Crystal and Jack Manley.
Hello, everybody. What's up? And welcome to another episode of Revenge of the Film Nerds. I am so excited to be here, BK in the house. And also with me tonight is the lovely, the extraordinary, manly Jack Manley. How's it going, Jack?
I'll tell you what, I'm excited to be here too. Something about whenever we try to do comedies, BK, everything goes wrong. We have been trying to get to this podcast for a month, and thing after thing has just kept coming up.
You know, I don't know what it is. It's very humorous. I don't know if it's, the elder gods out here trying to give us a real life comedy, but my God, the complications and real life events that have made getting this episode recorded is insane. So I am so freaking excited to actually get into this and have some fun today.
I am too. And and on a semi-serious note, I think it's important we say this as creative people. We talk a lot on this show about projects getting shelved or things going into development hell and it taking a little while for things to come out. And so what we're doing right now is we're kind of making our peace with the fact that we've had that kind of lull in our creative process. And if you're a creative out there dealing with the same thing, just know that that's okay. If you've got work that you care about and that you want to come back to, you're going to find your way back to it the same way we find ourselves once again talking about the films we love.
Oh man, I love the way you said that, Jack. You always be sending it home. I gotta get good like you. But this week we're gonna really get into something I'm so excited to talk about, and we were able to actually watch this film with my community as well, and that is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Absolutely. Robert Zemeckis' 1988 film. It has a screenplay by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman. The lead animator on the project was Richard Williams, and edited by Arthur Schmidt, who we've got to give a shout out to because the editing on this project was a massive undertaking, BK.
Absolutely. It would be honestly a shame if we had not mentioned Arthur there. This is by far probably one of the most difficult things to edit that we've covered, and we're definitely going to get into it. But first, I think they've got to hear it, Jack.
I think they do. What do they got to hear?
They got to hear that BK synopsis.
All right, let's get this going.
All right, a disillusioned, humorless private detective is thrust into the world of tunes after being hired by the head of a Hollywood studio to blackmail another executive. But when that executive winds up with a safe dropped on his head, the PI must come to defense of a fated star, a tomb rabbit accused of the murder and on the run. Will the two be able to solve the mystery behind the crime and save the world of tunes forever? Watch the movie, find out. Or listen to us because we're about to get into it.
Oh, we're about to get deep into it. But yeah, no, it's one of these things that it absolutely, we talk about the editing undertaking up front because of the fact that this was probably the most pivotal convergence ever in film history of both live action and animation. And we're not talking computer animation here, BK. We're talking old school techniques. We're talking cell shading and optic compositing, everything being done by hand.
It's beautiful. It's the chef's kiss of animation. You know what I'm talking about, with the overlays and the pages and all the frames, that's what we're getting into here. But I have to actually get into this before we hop into the technical details because
please,
Jack, this was my first time really seeing the film. I can't believe I waited till I was an adult to see something like this. So mind you, all the reactions you're going to hear from me throughout this episode are going to be super genuine, and I sound like a child. I just have to preface this for everyone who's not ready. Yes, this in fact was my first time seeing it in full completion.
Well, I think it's okay if you sound a bit like a child. Like, it's something that I've been watching since I was a child. You know, I must have been maybe 5, 6 when my mom first showed this to me. So it's been a film staple for me as long as I've really had cognition about the art of film. And I don't know if I ever understood just how important and influential this piece of work was until I got older and, you know, went to film school and learned the real technical ins and outs of this. But it's something that I've always really enjoyed. And going back and watching it as an adult, I realized one of the reasons my parents were so quick to introduce me to it is because there's just as much for you if you are 30 as there is if you were 3. It's a film that is full of anything you could want for the family, and it is a hilarious, well done film. So there is so much to enjoy there, BK. So keep that wonderment, keep that childlike wonder.
Jack, 5, 6, this might be a little too young to be watching this. There's a lot of adult themes and jokes, you know, just go right over your head throughout this. I don't know, man.
I mean, you say that, but I saw my first R-rated movie when I was about 6 or 7, so I clearly have problems anyway.
Understood. It's okay. I was one of those too.
Oh man, but you know, in terms of the film history of this, it's a hard place for me to figure out where to start with this because there's a lot of context here for this film, both about the actual physical art of live action and animation, about the world that they were in, the 40s setting that this film took place in, and there's just a ton that went on with the development of this film throughout the 80s. I think, BK, I'm going to start, today with the convergence of live action and animation, because that thread of history is as old almost as the art of filmmaking itself. Literally within decades of creating the art of film, we were trying to combine live action and animation.
I think that's fascinating because I know I'm the animation like junkie out of the two of us, but I think this is where you actually outshine me a bit because we're going back is what you're telling me. Like you're going back to where I didn't even realize animation went back, and now I feel like I need to take my card away. So put me on, like honestly, put me on, because some of the tunes and things we see throughout the movie all come from this very specific era. Am I correct?
You're absolutely right. It all starts in 1918 with a character created by Max Fleischer, an animator in the early days of film, called Coco the Clown. Now, BK, Max Fleischer is the guy who came up with Betty Boop, so you're familiar with that animation style. I know that up front.
Yes.
And Coco, you have seen Coco, even if you don't think you have. In fact, he's got a small little cameo in Roger Rabbit if you're quick enough to see him. But he is the tall, black and white, really slender clown with a very pronounced nose. And this he is basically the first animated clown. You would recognize him from that early era because he was the first. And he is kind of our inflection point into live action and animation in a very silly way, because Fleischer, in playing around with film and playing around with actually the early techniques of compositing onto still frames, would do things like create videos of Coco the Clown riding on top of a cat or getting involved in a boxing match with the cat. Little small, kind of idiosyncratic, almost breaking the fourth wall kind of interactions with early strips of film. And it was a way to kind of give cartoons this vibrance in context with the rest of the film reel.
Wow. Okay. That makes sense. And you are right. I feel like I have seen this Coco. Like the image is very prominent in my head. So when animation started doing this, where was the change where it was a little bit more common to see? Like, was there a time throughout Hollywood where we kind of saw a little bit more of the in between? Because I can only really remember things like Osmosis Jones, and that's not even like what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like we're talking like live action and animation at the same time, right? Not going back and forth.
Exactly.
So when did that happen?
Well, that started happening very early on, you know, Coco being that first example. But it's important to understand, because we don't get this context in the modern era of film. But animation and cartoons have been so integral to the history of film because they were always part of the reel. Back in the day, particularly in the time where Roger Rabbit is set, there was a tradition of doing what was known as block booking, where a studio would send a theater its entire slate of films and would send them specific double feature style reels to be played. And on that double feature, you would have news, you would have the cartoon, you would have the B movie, the intermission, and then the A movie. So cartoons have existed in the consciousness of filmmakers for the entire golden age of Hollywood, you could say. And you really started seeing those examples of those styles coming together on the same exact frame. In the 1940s, it became very ubiquitous. The most famous example is probably the dance with Jerry Mouse in the film Anchors Away. It's a very famous dance sequence with Gene Kelly. And, they're both wearing sailor outfits. You probably have seen it on stage, or you've at least seen clips of it. It's that ubiquitous. And there were other instances with characters like Donald Duck where you would see crossover during this time as well. But it really had gone out of vogue for almost 40 years by the time Roger Rabbit rolled around. Really, the most compelling example near Roger Rabbit of this style was Pete's Dragon. And even then, the major difference between Pete's Dragon and Who Framed Roger Rabbit was that in Pete's Dragon, the frame remained still when the animated characters were interacting with live-action characters. In Roger Rabbit, the frame is fluid. It is moving with these characters. The animated characters are given almost more life because of this in inhabiting the screen.
Glad you pointed that, because I remember Pete's Dragon. I do. All right, that was it. I also feel like the distinction as well, like you mentioned, right? The frames were still, but also Pete's Dragon was kind of like, its own world at some point, versus like this was Roger Rabbit was really trying to like meld two worlds together. So I feel like that's got to be a far more daunting task, like conceptually, let alone technically, to actualize.
Well, certainly. And they also gave themselves the crutch of needing to do the film in a very stylized manner. Because as we mentioned, this is immediately in the post-war. This is the noir period of Hollywood that this film is set in. So as a detective story, it had to take on those aesthetics. These tunes not only had to inhabit the physical space, but they also had to be grungy and grimy. It had to be kind of the seedy underbelly of cartoons as well. And that was crucial because Hollywood, like everything in that era, was getting more and more cynical in that post-war period. And so it's a very difficult needle to thread, I would say, because it's dealing with all of these different forces within the world at large. Like 1947 is a very, very interesting period for this to be set, because that's about the year before the golden age of Hollywood was officially done and dusted.
Wow. Okay. And I'm glad also that you pointed out that this was noir, right? Because the film really does hone into that genre. And I know we're going to get more into it, but it's kind of important to put it now because these are all like the history as to why, the creators decided to go this route. Because as you watch it, and I'm watching it for the first time, I'm like, we're following a PI? Like, that's the story? Like, it's very interesting. And for you to kind of commit to a story like that with this type of animation, like, there's got to be somebody somewhere along the line who was like, this story is going to hit. Like, so how did we get there, right? We've talked about how animation kind of got there. We talked about, the style, but how do we get the story that we found out was a book to what we saw on screen, Jack?
Well, you answered your own question right there. It comes from that Gary K. Wolfe book, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, which is, in my research, completely different as a story to the actual movie that we see on screen. I like to say to people, the best ever film or book to film adaptation I've ever seen is Fight Club. This might be the least close adaptation of a book in Hollywood. Who Censored Roger Rabbit is the story of Eddie Valiant, the same detective as in the film, but he is not dealing with cartoons. He's dealing with comic strip characters. In particular, he is investigating the murder of a syndicator of a strip and the death of Roger Rabbit. And the whole story is built around these tropes of comics. Things like word bubbles are meant to be major clues within the story. Characters are able to draw new versions of themselves to be like temporary stunt doubles that eventually like fade out. Point in fact, in the novel, it's Roger Rabbit's sort of stunt double, his doppelganger, who helps Eddie Valiant solve the crime. And so what it did do is it created this idea that comic characters could live in and inhabit the same world as human beings, even if their existence was governed by different rules. Gary K. Wolfe's novels saw these characters as living in a symbiotic relationship with each other in modern society. And so when you see a concept like Toontown come out of that in the final film, it's surprising how different and how light it is compared to the novel. And the novel is very dark. But it is also completely expected that this would be a conclusion you could reach.
Wait, very dark. Very dark how, Jack? Come on. You got to tell me. Like, how dark can it get? Like, where are people just, like, slaughtering people left and right? Or is it, like, gruesome?
Well, exactly.
Ooh.
It's you know, there's a lot of murder that goes on. Roger is, not this lovable comic rabbit. He's desperate. He is out seeking revenge. Like, he wants to set into motion the plot to kill these people who have wronged him. And in that process ends up getting himself killed. There's a lot more, sort of gritty subject matter around comic strips. And it's an enticing kind of novel. It's an enticing kind of thing to get a couple of chapters into, because it's an entirely different world. Like, it's a whole new experience, and I recommend it if you're interested. But don't go into this thinking that you're getting a somewhat dark family movie. You're getting a full-on noir experience using a highly stylized idea. And maybe, I think that's probably why Disney was so adamant about getting the rights to this novel. They bought the rights almost immediately. By the end of 1981, when the novel came out, Disney owned it.
Wow. I mean, now that I think about it, though, that is kind of a novelty idea. Like, if anybody's going to have it, it's going to be someone, right? Like Disney, who could actualize a story like that. And I'm also glad that you got into the book being kind of noir genre based as well, because that makes sense as to why the film kind of stayed true to that. While it's a little less gruesome when you watch it, it still has that feeling like I am like in there nitty gritty, giving you them Jessica Jones vibes, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, one of the things about noir that is really special about the genre is the type of desperation that the characters are typically under. And as I mentioned, 1947 Hollywood, the year before the death of the Golden Age, is a really great setting to create the kind of desperate characters you need for a good detective story. 1948, the year immediately after the setting of Roger Rabbit, is when the Paramount consent decree was passed down by the Supreme Court. They had a decision against Paramount wherein they decided the studios were far too vertically integrated. They were controlling the entire chain from pre-production and development all the way to exhibition. And these monopolies had to be broken up by the Supreme Court. So in 1948, the studios, which had these really cushy relationship with these theaters around the country they owned, and this ability to just send them their entire film slate no matter what they did, suddenly had to introduce competition to these old theaters that they used to have these cushy relationships with. And so these desperate people, this desperate noir setting was perfect in film. The film industry was ripe and ready for it. And it's just really, really intelligent the way that that was folded into the story to make sure that the aesthetics of the novel could hold up.
That's like an adaptation done right, though. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to always be one-to-one. Like, it's fine. What's most important is capturing the essence of the source material and really, really working that and paying homage throughout what you're showing. So shout outs to that, because I had no idea we even had a source material until Jack went in on this research for us. Like, bro, I was shook, let me tell you.
And I'll tell you what, though, BK, is you talk about it, getting done right. It takes time in Hollywood sometimes to get this done right. And this project was no exception. It started development between 1981 and 1983 with a couple of names attached to it, most notably Paul Rubens. Pee Wee Herman was attached to do parts of the film. But it got shelved in part because they just couldn't find the right creative team. And that seems crazy when you think about the fact that the eventual director, Robert Zemeckis, was pitching to direct this film in the first push. But, and this is a shock to say with Zemeckis, he got rejected due to his flops.
Oh, no.
Now, BK, we know Robert Zemeckis nowadays. He's the guy who did Forrest Gump. He did Romancing the Stone, Back to the Future. But 82, he was just coming off of Used Cars, which nobody saw and none of the critics liked. This was a guy searching for a start to his track record.
I don't know how to express my anger sometimes because I wish I was there. Like, I'm like, really? This is what happened? Like, y'all saw this guy and said nah, and I understand, when you see a flop, you're like, okay, like, it's a risk. But I'm always curious as to how and when that moment is when the studio flips. When the studio's like, okay, let's give this guy a chance. Like, Jack, when was that moment for this movie?
Well, really what happened was the takeover by Eisner and Katzenberg of Disney. As with so many of these animated initiatives by Disney in this revival they had in the late 80s, early 90s, it came down to that leadership. Jeffrey Katzenberg, in particular, was critical with Roger Rabbit. He felt that such a potent idea and such a potent script would be a great launching pad for Disney to revive their animated brand. It was a cynical business exercise in one sense, but it was also an executive in a position of authority looking at a risky project, and Roger Rabbit was quite risky, and saying, you know what, let's go for it because the dividends this could pay if we get it right could be so good for us that it could allow us to indulge in our animation more and more. And so with Eisner, the two of them approached Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment to get involved and produced. So yet again, our boy Steven Spielberg steps into another pivotal film project.
That's our boy Spielberg, always there. I didn't even realize I was a Spielberg stan until we started doing this podcast, man. So why bring him on, though, Jack? Like, is he just God tier in general? I mean, I know he's God tier, but, like, what element did he provide here for this film?
Well, as an executive producer, what Spielberg really seized upon here was his ability to work with other professionals in Hollywood. The first critical thing they did is they took the principal crew that was getting onto this project, including our lead animator, and they went to Industrial Light and Magic to do an animation test. They had to physically confirm that they could do this film. Because as we mentioned, people had not moved the frame with animated characters. I know it sounds like it's a simple thing, guys, but animating on the move is horrendously difficult. But critically, it's not impossible.
I'm glad you're pointing this out, though, and emphasizing it because, like, for perspective, right, we mean, like, having multiple framed shots in one shot, so whether you're having like a wide one or a close one, and then watching the characters, the actors, move throughout a scene from multiple angles. We're saying that has never been done with drawn characters until then.
And with cell shading, you have to reposition the overlay every time the frame moves. You have to make sure that you're getting the height right. You have to make sure you're getting position right. Otherwise, your animated characters are going to jump all over the frame or even do slight jumps that will jar you and make you realize, oh, this was just painted on top of the frame. This doesn't look like a very good film. So they had to go through thorough testing in order to make sure this was going to be possible. And being able to do that with Amblin was crucial. Also crucial was Spielberg's ability to actually negotiate with no fewer than 6 major animation rights holders in order to use their characters for this film. He got Warner Brothers involved, Fleischer Studios, King Feature Syndicate, Felix the Cat Productions, Turner Entertainment, and Universal Pictures, and made sure that all of them could be dealt with in a peaceable way to get this film done. He even drew certain compromises between entities like Disney and Warner Brothers to make sure that no studio's characters were held up with more veneration than the other. The scene in the Toon review with Donald Duck and Daffy Duck doing their dueling pianos, it was stipulated that both characters had to be equally good at the piano. Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse had to appear in the same scene. It was the same deal with Porky Pig and Tinkerbell to end the film. These little compromises and these little negotiations that Spielberg took in part were so influential to getting the film made and to having the final product on our screens.
I'm fascinated at these negotiations. Low key, I want to be Spielberg when I grow up. I want to be that guy. Like, I want to see that moment pan out. Be like, hey, look, check it. We'll have Mickey in and Bugs, but look, ain't nobody gonna outshine the other. I promise you. You can count on me, dog. I swear to God, I want to be that guy. Because it was needed. Honestly, with that negotiation, I feel kind of created the magic, to be honest. Almost that limitation really bred such great creativity in some of the most iconic and memorable moments throughout the entire film, Jack.
It did, but it almost makes me a little bit sad, too, because there were some notable holdouts to this process that, you speculate on how they would have been involved in the film. Turner Entertainment withheld Tom and Jerry. King Features withheld Popeye and all the residual characters from that series. And it's noticeable. It's this one big chunk of animation during the 20th century that is not represented in this film. And that's kind of a tragedy, I think.
No, I agree with you, too. I feel like it's a little sad because you're like, man, looking back on it, maybe that studio should have did the deal, because this is a film that is transcendent throughout time at this point now. That's a big loss for those studios, I'm just saying.
And you know what? There's a lot of that kind of regret associated with this film in a weird way within the casting and directing process. When this film started resuming, the first person that Eisner and Katzenberg and Spielberg thought would be good as a director was Terry Gilliam. And unfortunately, he rejected the project, which gave our boy Zemeckis, coming off of Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future, that opportunity to slide in. The character of Eddie Valiant, who was played by Bob Hoskins, was offered to none other than Eddie Murphy. And Murphy turned it down and still says to this day it's the role he most regrets not signing on for.
Wow, I had no idea. That would have been a different movie. Wow. All right, we got to get into this because the characters and the roles that are played, and now you're pulling out the actors. I feel like we've got to transition into what the story is really about, because there are a lot of things that were decided behind the scenes that really affected, I feel, the entire outcome of the movie. Very specific in regards to the people casted for the characters and kind of their performance as well.
Oh, 100%. And it's an interesting film to get into from a lot of aspects. I think a fun place to start is with the structure. You, BK, have always loved talking about films in terms of coming in acts. And I think it's a really elegant way of breaking down a film. And in this case, it's very plain to see that Roger Rabbit is 3 very concise acts. There is an opening 30 minutes that builds up your characters, builds up your world, gives you what you think the stakes are going to be. There's a second act where you really find out what those stakes are and where the mystery really develops. And then at that climax in that third act, it all comes to fruition. So it's a beautifully structured film. And the opening, in terms of building that world, I mean, what better way to do it than showing us a cartoon?
That's so awesome that you brought that part up, because really, guys, my reaction for this, I was like so confused. I was like, I thought this was a live action with some characters in it, not a whole animated sequence. I was so confused. And I wasn't the only one. I also remember from the previews when they were showing off this film that people actually walked out during this cartoon animation bit because they had the same reaction as me, but didn't want to give the film a chance. So the opening is a very risky, I think, choice, but also intelligent, because the fourth wall break that happens immediately after this cartoon scene is phenomenal. Like, I will never forget that moment.
Well, it's really a genius fourth wall break into that world because of the way things are set up. We're just here as an audience watching, I hate to say standard because I think a lot of these old cartoons are genius, but a fairly standard format for the cartoon. Roger has been put in charge of taking care of baby Herman and making sure that he's safe while the mother goes out and does some shopping. And in the process, of course, baby Herman ends up getting into the kitchen to try and get some cookies, and chaos ensues. Roger has knives thrown at him by a cutting board. He ends up with a kettle on his head, stuck inside of an oven. He ends up, drinking hot sauce and, his mouth catching on fire. There are all these little, basic comic ticks, comic beats, and you see Roger as this very funny entertainer. But the moment the fridge hits him and he sees birds instead of stars, which seems like such a small thing, the production gets cut by an angry director, and you suddenly see this image of Roger not as this, simple cartoon character, but as a deeply flawed aging actor. Somebody who is trying to keep his mojo despite all these worries he has about a philandering wife, potentially, about his career, about all of these things that he cares about. And you see him kind of having a nervous breakdown trying to get this thing done. So you see a cartoon character as a flawed protagonist right from the get-go.
It's honestly, like, that alone, like, got me invested. Like, off top, I was like, oh, this character has depth. He's a silly character with depth, which we don't normally see, especially a cartoon. And I also think it's important to mention, like, when we say fourth wall break, yes, we fourth wall break into seeing actual actors. We come out of a full cartoon, actual actors show up, and now we're like, wow, here is this real world where the two worlds have collided. And my God, I really think the artistry of the film is most especially seen within that scene there, because when you hear about what the actors have to do to kind of get this accomplished, I mean, I can't recall his name, Jack. I don't know off the top of the head who played Roger.
Charles Fleischman.
Charles Fleischman, thank you. When he played the scenes, like, he full...
Charles, excuse me, BK. I want to make sure I correct this myself real quick. Charles Fleischer, not Fleischman.
Fleischer.
That would have been a bad mistake for such a great role.
So Charles Fleischer really just owned this role as Roger Rabbit. He, like, owned it, as I mean, dressed up in a full goddamn bunny suit and blocked out the scenes with the other actors. That's how invested this guy was in creating this character and giving it this realistic feeling and very human kind of take of a cartoon character really down on his luck, not just a character, but an actor. We were seeing cartoons portrayed as actors having a job, very realistic. And that first scene really just sets that stage. Your world building is built within the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie.
And the flawed character in Roger Rabbit in that same scene allows us to go into this beautiful transition to focusing on our principal protagonist, Eddie Valiant, Bob Hoskins, who is immediately presented as a similarly flawed character. The first thing you see Eddie Valiant do on screen is take a swig out of his hip flask and disdainfully say, "Tunes." You see this guy who, as he goes into R.K. Maroon's office, the owner of the cartoon studio, and you see him talk to him about what he has to go do, which is he was basically supposed to go take pictures of Roger's wife, Jessica, fooling around on him to get Roger's head right, to get him back on track. You see this portrait of a man who is not just distrustful of cartoons, but is deeply disdainful of them. He does not like the fact that he has to share space with these characters who are, seemingly immortal and untethered from the very real aspects of human life that someone like Valiant is grappling with.
I think Eddie Valiant's, like, as a character is a very interesting character, and I'm glad you, like, described him that way. He is very skeptical and very, like, detached from Toons, when it seems that the world around him is very enamored by Toons and is very, at least moderately accepting of Toons. He seems to be someone who's like, all right, I'm over here, and the role that is played as well, being able to play this, main real life protagonist with all of your, co-stars being mostly animated. Shout outs to the actor, bro. Shout out to it, because
we have to get into this about Bob Hoskins, BK.
yeah, bro, Bob Hoskins, like, they literally had to develop a new technique of acting for this guy, because he had to do the scenes without anybody there. Now, of course, like, we block it, they full block it, they'll use and by blocking we mean they'll run out the scene per scene with a stand-in, and then they'll do it with like a model bunny, because he has to literally practice his vision. That's the hard part, is practicing where the gaze is, maintaining that gaze, and having a conversation while no one is there, right? There is no CGIing out things in this film. Things are empty and things are drawn over. Like, I have to emphasize that.
And really, it's amazing the level of work that Bob Hoskins had to put into learning basically an entire new style of acting. He had to learn very basic mime techniques. There had to be real weight to his hand when he would pick up Roger Rabbit, or when he would punch one of the Toon Patrol, one of Judge Doom's cronies. He had to learn how to fix his eye line, not through a character. It would be very evident if he was looking in Roger Rabbit's direction but not at him. He had to find a fixed point in the air to focus on where Roger would be, or where another Toon character would be, so that he could believably act to them. Like, it's a weird role to consider somebody for a Best Actor Oscar, but it seems kind of crazy that Bob Hoskins wasn't considered the Best Actor of 1988 for being able to pull this off. There may have been better dramatic performances, but my oh my, when it comes to the craft of acting, nobody had Hoskins beat that year.
No, it's honestly phenomenal. And the reason why I feel like we had to take this time to go into like the technicality of it is because these techniques are seen throughout the film in many different scenes, which we will kind of talk about, and there are other elements. But when they're introduced is, I feel, when it's the most prominent of how invested these actors are into this role and how much time and dedication went into kind of creating this world. And, me and my world building, so I love to add it. And really, the character Eddie Valiant is our eyes throughout the rest of the film. As we follow him and the plot kind of starts to ensue, we get to meet and interact with other characters, other Toons, other real life people, through him and with him.
And you start to see, really, after he gets this assignment to go take pictures of Jessica Rabbit, to dig up dirt to get Roger right, you start seeing, as he gets ready to go to the Ink and Paint Club to do his job, that the world of Hollywood is changing and decaying around them. The red car, which is the trolley system that is providing mass transit around Hollywood, has been bought by some company called Cloverleaf Industries. His former secretary, Doris, is now no longer working for him, but runs her own bar, and Eddie owes her money. And most importantly, you get the earliest insight into why Eddie Valiant does not appreciate or trust the Toon world. Is you find out from Doris, as Eddie walks away with the camera to go to the club, you find out that a Toon killed his brother.
And that's really important, because you get a lot of other nods to how much, of a traumatic experience that was for Eddie, and how it really motivates a lot of his actions for quite some time throughout the film.
He's not just drinking out of that hip flask because, he's a PI, he needs to be an alcoholic. No, he's an alcoholic because he's in pain.
Not to mention his brother was his partner within the firm. He had his private investigation company. I don't know what you call that, but it was his partner. It wasn't just family. That's someone you're going out, getting the dirt on with. That's someone, you spend your life with. So to see Eddie kind of still take on this assignment involving Toons, and it's really exciting, I think. Like, I wonder what it took for him mentally to kind of get the cojones to be like, all right, I'm going to do this, and not, let it affect his ability to perform his job, because he does do his job. Let me tell you, when he gets into that club and snags those pictures of our lovely, beautiful American sex symbol, Jessica Rabbit. Jack, you got to tell him right quick.
Jessica Rabbit, she really, I think, BK, and you can back me up on this, she was probably a lot of young boys' introductions to puberty.
110%, Jack.
She is literally drawn to be the most buxom, beautiful woman that you could possibly imagine, voiced by an uncredited Kathleen Turner, believe it or not. And she just gets to exist as this character. She is Jessica Rabbit because of the way things are set up around the film and because of the way she carries herself. And she is the femme fatale of this noir world. I think, in a way, her fitting such an easy archetype is part of what makes it easy for Eddie Valiant to do his job. He's very clear in these first 30 minutes. He's not working for a tune. He's working for RK Maroon. You know, he's got a job that a person gave him. He just happens to have to work with tunes. And because what he's seeing is this seedy underbelly of the cartoon world, right down to, you know, Jessica Rabbit in her extremely low-cut dress, you know, putting, you know, a bunch of live-action human being guys to shame while she does her musical number, you know, literally, you know, abusing them a little bit. You know, it's easy for Valiant to disassociate the tunes with anything good or joyful because he's seeing everything in the opening of this film that would confirm his suspicions that tunes are bad news.
I'm glad you say it that way. And I feel like you got to emphasize that, like the seedy underbelly point that you bring up, because that is really what we're seeing. We're seeing a tune club, right, where human people come to be served and waited on by tunes and watch performances of other tunes, right? That is such an interesting world. Like, that's what's taboo. That's what's like on the low. It's what people do but don't tell their friends, you know? Like, this is the vibe of what we're getting. And Jessica Rabbit, my God, like, this girl is a bombshell. I love how they make her thick. I love how they make her a bodacious. I'm trying to use all the adjectives right now. I love how she is, like, just well endowed. Okay, they went out of their way to really kind of create, though, a character that could really only exist as a tune. And I think that's important. It's not like they're trying to over sexualize cartoons. They're trying to make a character really stand out and really show the differences between real life and the tune life. Like, you look at Jessica's waist and you're like, that's not happening IRL, guys. It's not. But as a tune, these limitations are gone, and you can kind of see this overwhelming sex appeal she's able to have being an animated character, and then to discover her true character of being actually quite innocent is very, very awesome for me, seeing a character drawn that way.
Well, it's interesting because it's and it's an extremely good call out by you, BK, because I think that she does a very good job of portraying as a tune what it means for any woman to have that female armor, especially if you're a woman that a lot of men are going to consider attractive in the conventional sense. Because all of these men are literally, you know, falling over themselves for Jessica, it gives her power. It gives her the ability to defend herself by being overtly sexual, but also disdainful of these men. And it's no wonder that she comes across like that in a film noir. She gets to be both sex symbol and femme fatale here. And it is a potent mix to create an interesting character who, despite being kind of innocent, is never really above suspicion here.
And I'm glad you pointed it out. And I think it's intriguing, honestly. Like, it's already showing me a lot of depth in things that could be very chalked up to being a trope. You know, it's really showing that, like, there was thought and tension behind this, and there's a bit more to be seen than what's really going on. And you kind of get that when Eddie goes to take the incriminating evidence of Jessica playing patty cake. Like, actual patty cake. See, I'm watching and I'm thinking it's a euphemism.
You had to love that that was not a metaphor. It was just patty cake.
It was a euphemism. I thought we was talking, you know, a little slap on some cheeks, you know, whatever cheeks you want. Like that. No, they were dead ass playing a hand clap game. And that was actually considered incriminating evidence. It destroyed Roger when he saw said evidence that Eddie brought to the studio. So I think that's fascinating, Jack. How do you respond to that as as a character, as a Toon character seeing patty cake, like, are we supposed to think patty cake is a bad offense because we're childish? Are we supposed to look at Roger being dumb and naive because it is only patty cake?
Well, I think it can be taken a couple of different ways, because I think about the way that I took this scene when I was really young. Is, before you when you're a little kid, you have some understanding of sex, but you don't know what it is or like what it means in society or how it influences dynamics between people. But what you can understand as a little kid is you see his wife doing something with Marvin Acme, the executive of Acme and the owner of Toontown. What you see Jessica Rabbit doing with him is kind of disloyal. And that's the way you take it as a kid, is you're like, that's not right, because, she's supposed to be, if Roger's having a problem with patty cake, maybe they should only be playing patty cake together. Maybe they're supposed to be loyal to each other. And that's where this comes from. And there is that level when you're an adult as well of, it's not actually sex, it's just patty cake. This is kind of funny. But there are multiple emotional levels to take it on. And Roger reacts in that kind of childlike way of feeling like he has lost somebody, and it drives him crazy. Like, he's literally talking about, he's talking himself through angry delusions that they're going to be happy no matter what. And he busts out of the office in a cartoon silhouette, determined to make sure things are right. And it's a very painful moment, as you mentioned, BK. It's a tough moment for him. But I think it comes from a place that you can react to in very different ways as an audience.
And then we go from that then, I guess, necessarily to the next act, right? Like, because now we've set things up, we see what's going on here, and as, the evidence is being displayed, some shit kind of goes down, Jack.
Yeah, no doubt. Eddie Valiant goes back to his office and he drinks himself into a stupor, which, you can tell is something that he has done quite frequently over the last several years. And he is woken up by a lieutenant friend of his who quickly informs him that Marvin Acme has had a safe dropped on his head. And so they have to go to the crime scene to figure out what has happened.
I think that's so funny. Like, it's got to be a safe. Like, how iconic, guys. Like, literally, you couldn't have asked for a better, like, moment of like, wow, the case is wrapped, I'm done. Nope, just kidding. You would have thought, Eddie, get your ass up, because you're about to go on one hell of a ride.
Yeah, we thought we had understood the stakes. We thought it was going to be building on this world. But it appears, at this point in time, it appears as though Roger Rabbit, in a fit of jealousy, has killed Marvin Acme, and the stakes have been raised. And the stakes are raised because this is the point in the movie, 30 minutes in, when our principal antagonists, Judge Doom and the Toon Patrol, are introduced.
Oh, man. Judge Doom. Can we talk about him, Jack? Like, first of all, that character got a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Like, he is, like, not only terrifying idealistically, but also how he's presented, okay? Like, from the fit down to the whole portrayal from our boy from Back to the Future, if you know what I'm saying, is very interesting to see this character be in here. And honestly, like, probably the most evil character we see.
Oh, easily the most evil character we see. And thank goodness Christopher Lloyd was able to bring a very high level of dedication to this role. And he ended up being just that right bridge for what the creators of this story were looking for. They tried to cast, a lot of actors for this role. They ended up not going with Tim Curry for Judge Doom because he was just too scary for it. And on that same other side of the coin, they ended up not casting John Cleese for the role of Judge Doom because they didn't think he would be scary enough. And Lloyd was just able to find that right balance of existing clearly as a comic villain within this story, but making you feel real, chills down the back of your spine, especially when he introduces to us the concept of the dip. Now, BK, it's been established for us in this film that there's nothing that can kill a Toon until Judge Doom was able to figure out how to create this substance that all you got to do is put a tune in it for a couple seconds and they're gone.
I'm terrified. Like, reason being, okay, world building junkie here. That's a part of a Toon's character, right? Is being able to like get hit a bunch of times, literally be murdered, and come back to life without really any long-term scratches. This goop dip crap, I don't like it. It's slimy. It looks like acid. I'm good. Is actually the ultimate end for a cartoon. Now, for me, that raises crazy stakes, right? As a Toon, it's like, wow, huge life-ending consequences are happening out of my control, and it's not even a Toon doing this. This is a human, as what we see. This guy, this judge is like, yeah, screw Toons. I'm ready to kill him. Look at me. And you're like, terrified. Like, I couldn't imagine watching this as a child. I'm sitting here like, my God, Mickey Mouse is gonna fucking die. Like, I am scared, okay? Like, that may be just me, but that's the type of weight I feel like this dip kind of brings. It's like, whoa, like, we got people out here who are trying to pull up and genocide Toons.
Well, really, I mean, and the thing about it too is that Judge Doom isn't even as animated as you were there in describing it. He's very cold about it, and that is intentional. When the concept of the dip was developed by the screenwriters, they really wanted to make it, I'm sorry to invoke Godwin's Law, people, but as analogous to Hitler's final solution as they possibly could. They wanted the dip to make you think about genocide.
They said that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was
oh my God.
That was how they intended this to come across, and they intended Doom to be this really cold, calculating figure that would have no qualms about killing Toons. And so it sets you up to, realize that Roger is in a lot of trouble. And so Eddie Valiant, he returns from this crime scene. He's not sure what, his involvement is going to be. And as he's about to step in his office, he is informed about the other linchpin to this mystery, that Acme had a will. And that will was reportedly supposed to give control of Toontown over to the Toons. But if that will can't be found, Toontown at midnight that night would turn over to the ownership of the highest bidder. So there are not just stakes here for Roger Rabbit, who has potentially been caught up in this murder, but there are consequences in play for every single Toon.
And then you thought the movie couldn't get any better. And then it did, right? Because for me, bro, I'm sitting there. I don't know about you, Jack, but I'm sitting there. I'm like, all right, case closed. We good. Like, I'd be happy if it ended here. I saw Jessica. Like, I'm happy.
Of course, that's what made both of us happy, I think.
That's what did it. Yes, we saw Jessica. We're good. Animation is nice. And then they're like, no. We really want you to, like, feel for not just the characters, but we want you to feel for the world. They want you to really care. And when we start to see how Judge Doom be moving, guys, like, he does not give a fuck. He does not care. He is like, let's go. It's on you, Toon. Goodbye. Very methodical, very, like, evil. He is this personification of evil, and we don't really see that. Every Toon we meet, whether they're bad or good, there's never really someone who is truly bad, holistically bad. Like, there's something about Toons that even the baddest of Toons never get this far. So that's what shook me here. And you get to see quite a few scenarios where he is just, we cringing. I mean, the bar scene, Jack, like, can we talk about that real quick?
We can talk about that for a second, but we got to get there first, because when Valiant finds out about that will and he steps into the office, we get a real sense of what you're talking about Toons, not being totally irredeemable, them having those qualities that you can still love them for, because Roger has been hiding in that office, and through pleading with really Eddie Valiant, he, impresses upon him that he's not the one that killed Acme. His response to his jealousy over Jessica playing patty cake was to write her a love letter on a blank sheet of paper he found. And so Valiant has to go through this whole process of first hiding Roger in his own office from the Toon Patrol when the Weasels come over to try and sniff him out, and then hiding him at Doris's bar. And you see while this is going on, Roger is an innocent through all this, while Valiant, through these subtle clues he's gotten from knowing Roger isn't guilty, is going around and trying to figure out the actual nitty-gritty of the mystery. You know, if Roger didn't kill Marvin Acme, who did and why? At first, he thinks it might be the guy who just hired him, R.K. Maroon. He had him put up some blackmail to potentially frame Roger Rabbit. Acme shows up dead, and suddenly, like, Maroon has this ability to get a controlling interest in Toontown by bidding on it. So he goes and checks the probate's office, but it's not R.K. Maroon who is trying to buy Toontown. It's Cloverleaf, the same company that bought up the red car. So it's this whole mystery going on, and in the middle of that, Judge Doom shows up at Doris's bar. We got there, BK. We finally got there.
No, I love it. This is why I need you, because it is important to kind of bring us there, because the bar scene doesn't hit if you don't know why we're there. And I really like it, okay? Just because the animation is just so awesome in it, okay?
The bar scene is beautiful and really important to the film because it brings up a couple of story points that are deeply, deeply critical to understanding this movie. The first is the fact simply that when they show up at the bar, when Doris and Eddie come in, Roger is dancing on top of the bar to a, fun time record and, smashing glasses on himself, whipping people's hair around. This guy, Angelo, at the bar, he's teasing. And Roger is doing this because he understands that laughter, and he makes this clear to Eddie Valiant, he understands that laughter is a weapon against the things that are sad and difficult in this world. Laughter is a very powerful thing to Roger. It is a unifying force, and it is a force for engendering loyalty and kindness and respect and justice in people. And you even see that bear out as Judge Doom is questioning the patrons at the bar. Angelo, who was laughing harder than anybody at Roger's routine, goes, "Yeah, I've seen a rabbit." And he goes, "Say hello, Harvey," in a nod to the Jimmy Stewart film Harvey, where there's an invisible rabbit. And you see that, making this guy laugh in a small, subtle way got him to protect Roger against the scariest human being in existence.
I love that little bit. I'm glad you explained it because I didn't know the Harvey joke. I didn't get it, but it was beaded so well where it was like, oh, this is a reference. I should know this. And that's probably the one joke I didn't get throughout the film.
More people need to see Harvey. It is a fantastic film, and I'm always going to rep James Stewart films because they're beautiful. But, it really does a great job of setting up the stakes for when Judge Doom does use the shave and a haircut trick, the one thing that can get any toon to reveal themselves. And it looks like Roger is going to be doomed. It's given us stakes in this scene. It's not just that Roger is getting dipped, but it's that these people around him feel genuinely upset and horrified by what's about to happen and resigned to their depression about it because Roger's made them laugh. There are stakes for these people in the bar now because somebody has brought something good into their life. But it's also because of this scene that Eddie starts to finally turn and find a little bit of his old self. He and his brother loved being detectives for the Toons when they were working together before his brother was killed. And you see the first signs that Valiant is really starting to re-embrace that when he hands Roger the drink, which he knows will make him go absolutely crazy and give them an opening to escape. He does the old, you do, I don't, you do, I don't routine.
Which I love. And just such a little nod to typical cartoon moments, right? I didn't know where the dun 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 came from. I didn't know there were words to that. That's what they did to me in kindergarten when they wanted us to pay attention, okay? And I clapped back, all right? That's what it was, okay? You all know it's a dun 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 dun, and then you clap back, everyone's quiet. That's what you do, okay?
We did not do that at my school, but I'm so.
Oh my gosh! All right,
I'm
if you did that, whoever's listening, if you did that, I need you to add us. Let us know if you did this when you were in like kindergarten, okay? Or if you knew this shaving a haircut. I don't even know what that is, okay?
I'm delighted that this is something that was a part of your life like that.
It was. I had no idea. So I'm listening and I'm like, oh, I know this melody. And I'm like, oh no. Like as it's happening, I'm realizing that that's going to get him. Like I'm anxious for him because I'm ready to do it as well. So it was so funny to have that moment there, being older in my life and not knowing where the hell it came from.
And it's beautiful because the cartooniest moment so far for Eddie Valiant is what ends up saving Roger. You know, he drinks the alcohol, he blows his lungs out, and which allows Eddie to knock out a couple of weasels, grab Roger, and get out. And they, escape using a cartoon cap and manage to hide themselves in a movie theater. But for all intents and purposes at this point, it doesn't look like Toontown is going to be saved. The will is nowhere to be found. Roger is still the primary suspect. And it seems as though Valiant is about to go on the run with Roger. They're getting out of Dodge. And it is just as they're about to leave this theater that, in keeping with those double features I talked about earlier in the History DK, the newsreel comes on, and it makes it clear that R.K. Maroon has sold the controlling interest in his own studio to Cloverleaf Industries. And now, very suddenly, Eddie understands that there is an actual connection and that Cloverleaf must be more than it seems. So he and Roger don't dodge out of town. They head straight over to Maroon Studios to confront R.K. Maroon.
Dun, dun, dun. It was such a good, timely moment because this is where it all goes down. Like, this is where all the pieces are aligning. This is where we see our main character, and he's embracing it a little bit. He's like, all right, we in this. Like, Roger, you and me, we out here. We got to save the tunes, I guess. Like, like, I'm kind of here. You start to see Eddie really, like, warm up at this point. He has been very anti-tune, and after he uses humor for the first time, you really kind of start to see the little little Grinch heart inside start to grow 3 times big in that moment there. And that's where I was like, okay, I didn't really like Eddie before that, Jack. I'm gonna be honest, he wasn't hitting for me at all.
That's entirely fair. Sad people are hard to like on film, even when you're told that you need to like them. And what really does shift that is this little twist right here, where it appears, in the way that the film is laid out, it appears that Jessica Rabbit, while, Valiant is confronting Maroon, it appears Jessica Rabbit has incapacitated Roger and shot Maroon. So Eddie is now chasing down Jessica Rabbit, who he thinks may be the linchpin to this whole conspiracy. But he's got to chase her to the one place he has avoided for so long, is he would have to go into Toontown. And there is a beautiful moment here, I think, where Eddie is about to go out into Toontown, and he's thinking about taking that one more swig of that bourbon to give himself the courage, and he realizes he doesn't need it, and he pours out the bottle. And you see that really the trick for him to get through his depression, to get through his alcoholism, is remembering who he is. And while, there are certain merits to that, there are also, if you're in a situation like that in real life, obviously get help. Don't just rely on yourself. But in the metaphorical layout of the film, it is a very strong beat to suggest that his character has finally re-embraced his funny side, because he has to if he's going to go on another case into Toontown.
Let me tell you, Toontown is also, like, you are going into it. Like, it is, the way they depict it, it's a lot, right? They really try to be like, okay, this is something entirely different than you've been seeing throughout the film. Like, mechanically wise, like, they went all in with, like, inverting, I think, what they tried to accomplish with the first half of the film, right? You have real world tunes are kind of here. And now in Toontown, it's like, no, tunes are the primary thing. And the only real world really is Eddie there trying to interact with it. And I feel like animation moments there are really what are crazy to me. Like, it's like they saved the best for last. They really went all the way, just showing the little nuances. Like, the elevator gag is always gonna get me. Like, I swear, Jack, like, I can't get over it.
And that's the thing, BK. Even the physics are different for Eddie Valiant. You know, he can get squished to the floor by the force of Droopy sending the elevator up at Mach speed. You know, he can get, fall from a giant height, only being given the spare, which is a tire, by Bugs Bunny and Mickey, only to be caught by Nina Hyena at the ground and saved so she can kiss him. Like, these little moments that show you he is at the prey of these cartoons, but yet he's more in control of himself than he has been at any point in the film. And he finally finds his way to Jessica Rabbit, but in a great twist, she doesn't shoot Eddie Valiant. She fires her gun behind him at the hand outstretched of Judge Doom, who was holding the gun that killed R.K. Maroon. And now it's become readily apparent to Eddie and to Jessica that despite the fact Roger is MIA, they now know who actually is killed Marvin Acme and who has committed all of these crimes around Toontown. And it is all about trying to go get Doom. But Doom gets the drop on him. He covers the road in dip, and Benny, the cartoon cab, drives over it, becomes incapacitated, and Valiant and Jessica Rabbit get taken in by Judge Doom to the Acme warehouse, where we get to our climax.
I had to cry. I'm sorry, Jack. I cried. Like, that's you kind of brushed over it just a little bit, like with Mr. Taxi Cab over the goop. It's goop. It's dip. I know. I keep calling it goop because it's like green. All right, guys. Makes me feel like, Nickelodeon slime, like that's all I keep thinking of. It's so sad. Like, I am so invested in the tunes at this point. I saw Taxi Cab Guy. He drove over. His tires wouldn't move. I was like, oh my God. That's like having the bottoms of your feet ripped off on something. Like, I was so pissed. Like, at this point, Judge Doom can go. I don't care who he is, what you do to him, but get him out of here, all right? Like, get him so far out of here. And they do it so excellent, is what I'm saying. It's like they get me so invested. They bring you in. They are upping the stakes, which I didn't think was possible, because now it's blatantly malicious. It's no longer this behind the scenes thing. It's in your face. It's like, no, we're kidnapping your two favorite characters, Roger Rabbit. We're kidnapping Jessica Rabbit. Look at them. They're about to die if Eddie can't get his shit together and figure out how to save the day.
Well, I mean, first, Roger really does try to save the day. He escaped from the trunk that Jessica threw him into, and he happens to be able to, he finds Benny, and Benny, thankfully, the cab is okay, ladies and gentlemen. He doesn't die because he went through the dip. He just hurts his tires. But he finds out the information about what's going down with Doom, and he tries to save the day. He's got the gun out. It looks like he's going to, be the conquering hero, and then he gets hit by a ton of bricks that get dropped on him by one of the weasels, and he's caught too. And it really, you're absolutely right about this build, is the antagonists just get more and more power. Like, the weasels and Judge Doom seem more unassailable as it looks like the wall at the end of the Acme warehouse is going to get broken down by this monstrosity that has been created to, dip the entirety of Toontown so that a freeway can be built across the Los Angeles metro area. Like, this is all one of the best lines of the film. Only an idea like a freeway, only an idea as crazy as a freeway could basically take out Toontown. But this is really where they're at. It looks like it's not going to be going well for them until Eddie realizes that he can save the day by being funny, BK. Now, these weasels, the Doom Patrol, the whole film, they've been told specifically, both by their leader, Smarty, and by Judge Doom himself, they need to stop laughing. They'll die laughing if they don't. And so Eddie picks up on this, and he starts doing his own song and dance routine and drives these weasels wild, BK.
Love that, though. I love that laughter was used as a weapon like that. Like, I think that was just so cool. Like, the concept of humor being like a tool, and being able to utilize it for good was so cool. Like you're seeing him like it's a little cringeworthy what he does, but it's awesome because it's him embracing it. Like that's what's funny is like look at him, like he's really doing it. It almost brings a sense of like joy, but also kind of cringe humor that he's owning the shit out of Jack.
Well, I mean, the thing that's beautiful about it, too, is a further affirmation of the point that Roger made in the bar about laughter being a very powerful weapon. You know, Eddie Valiant is really using this to save the day here, to take out these weasels so that he can confront Judge Doom and he can stop the dip machine from taking out Toontown. And it really is in this third act where the slapstick nature of animation really comes out in the real world, because this fight between Doom and Valiant is so reliant on a lot of very cartoony, very slapsticky prompts. Like he ends up with a magnet catching him against a barrel and uses a fake cartoon hole to get himself out of the way. You know, when Doom pulls out his blade, and in one of my favorite little gags in the movie, Valiant can only find a singing store that immediately starts crooning Sinatra. Like it's a very interesting, fun fight, but there are real stakes to it. You feel real tension and real worry.
I love that, and I love that scene. It's top 3 scenes because like it's all the elements coming together now. Now we're getting like Toon and real world really truly working in tandem. We had them inverted in the last kind of act, and now in this act it's like everything we've gathered throughout the film is kind of being applied at this time. You really get that feeling of like, you know, an action blockbuster where like the team is like really doing the thing, you know, everyone's on point. You get that vibe here with Eddie just really owning being funny and owning all of the things he's learned about how Toons operate from now. I mean, you can kind of even take like he's been observing this through his life through working with Toons, not just this one case, that this is something he's been, you know, keen to, and he's able to kind of actualize it where maybe someone wouldn't be able to do it as successfully as Eddie does. And here then it leads to, I think, a really big reveal for kind of the story, Jack, with Doom and in the middle of this fight, because I can't remember exactly when it happens, because this whole fight was just so enrapturing.
Oh, well, I can tell you, BK, is what better way in a movie with cartoons in it, what better way to take out your principal villain, or so we think, than with a steamroller. Doom ends up accidentally punching in a big jar of glue that Valiant uses to block a punch, gets his fist stuck to the front of the steamroller and gets his feet stuck in the glue and gets completely flattened by the thing. And, you know, we think we're done here. You know, Eddie turns off the dip machine. We think that Roger and Jessica are saved from being sprayed by it first. But then you just hear this wicked, cartoony laughter. And suddenly, a flattened Judge Doom pops off of the floor and reinflates himself, and you realize that he's a Toon.
Dun dun dun! Another one.
And not only that, BK, but he makes it clear that he is the Toon that killed Eddie Valiant's brother. And these other threads all of a sudden begin to make sense. Judge Doom only got power in Toontown because he was able to buy the election. Eddie Valiant's brother was killed when a piano fell on him while they were chasing someone who got away with the zillion simoleons, the realm of the coin of the realm in Toontown. And so you understand, oh, this guy stole this money, killed his brother, used that money to get elected, and is now trying to destroy all the Toons. So all of the stakes that have been built in this mystery around what has been dogging Toontown and what has been dogging Eddie Valiant all comes together in this fine point here at the end, and I think a very elegant way.
I think it's very interesting. At first, I was like, I don't know how I feel about him being a Toon. Like, I was like, man, like, it feels so dope that it was like a human who was jaded, you know, over Toons and like their ability to do stuff. And I was a little conflicted. I'm like, why is a Toon, like, you know, so conniving to the point where it's like doing all of these things like to find its own agenda? Like I didn't truly like it at the start. I was like, God damn it, like this is not what I wanted. I wanted to see some real people death, okay? And I didn't want him to be a toon. But I do think, though, that him being a toon is kind of important to the plot. It shows, though, that humans aren't the only ones that are evil, I feel. I feel like that's kind of the message I took, is that toons can be this conniving and evil as well, almost just showing, like, and reaffirming everything Eddie kind of had felt, but also giving that clarity as to, like, it's not all of them. Like, it was that moment where it was like, this is an individual who can be this way, and it's not all toons, and it's also not only the humans that are evil. It really just showed, I feel, kind of humanity on both sides. I don't know about you, Jack.
Oh, 100%. And it's what I think becomes ultimately what defeats Doom. Is, Doom in the final parts of this fight, he's indulging in the most cartoony aspects of himself. He turns one of his hands into a giant golden saw and is slicing at Valiant. He's trying to crush him in a corner. And he ends up getting, fooled into springing the dip on himself. And in, true Witch of the West fashion, he, melts into the dip and the day is saved. But it's saved because this human being, Eddie Valiant, was able to get over all of his flaws and all of his existential difficulties, whereas Doom, a cartoon, was so defined by his own zaniness and insanity as a bad toon that he could only act and interact in that way. So the ending of Doom and his final defeat is very fitting. And yet, we still don't know where this Will is, BK.
Yeah, we don't. Like, I'm always expecting something corny at that point. Like, after everything we had seen in this movie, I'm like, yo, he's gonna, like, Doom is gonna, like, melt, and in the melt, there's gonna be a golden tablet of will within the goop. I'm thinking the most ridiculous.
A golden tablet of will.
I don't know. Because I'm like, what could possibly happen now? Like, I've been, like, duped and reduped twice now. Now Doom is a toon. I'm conflicted. Where's the will? I want everyone to be happy, but we're not happy. Sure, the day is saved.
It's actually an elegant reveal, though, BK, because in the process of the fight, early in the movie, Marvin Acme had sprayed some disappearing ink on Eddie Valiant's shirt as a gag when they were in the Ink and Paint Club. And in this final scene, that stain comes back because during the fight, some of the reappearing ink that Acme stocks had gotten dislodged and had gotten on his shirt. And it clicks for Eddie that the will that was pictured in Marvin Acme's pocket during the patty cake photos, that it might also be written in invisible ink. And so he asks Roger to get out the love letter that he'd written for Jessica. And as he starts reading it to her, the will appears on the page in the reappearing ink, and the toons get control of Toontown. What better way to cap off the film, BK? It's corny, but it's not predictable.
I think that's a really good way to point it, because you had to have a happy ending, all right? It's a toon film, right? If we ain't getting no happy ending, I would have been pissed. I would have been like, what the hell did I just watch? Bugs Bunny was in a sad ending movie? Nah. To have that show up, yes, it was corny, but it full circled. We actually had no loose ends, right? We ended it. We put the bow on it. Turn up, literally. Give me the pig. Where's Tinkerbell? Sign me out.
Oh man, it's a good, nice, crisp ending to it too, which is something I always appreciate in Hollywood films. Even if you're going to give me that corny, kind of cheesy, happy ending, if you get out of there quickly and you get a concise end to the story, it typically makes me feel like I've had a good experience watching that film. And it ended up being a pretty good experience for Disney, if I do say so myself, because they really used this film to spark the rebirth of the Disney Renaissance. Like, this film, as much as other films, is really responsible for that resurgence in the 90s.
Oh, see, the resurgence of my whole fucking childhood, Jack? Is that what you're telling me? Like, everything I grew up on? See? Thank God for Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Thank God for Roger Rabbit, even though Disney seems to have a very kind of strained relationship with it. In particular, with Jessica Rabbit. Disney is very slow to acknowledge the influence of Roger Rabbit on things like The Lion King or Pocahontas or Mulan, these films that were able to get greenlit and done through the Disney Animation Studio because Roger Rabbit proved that they had some of the very best animators in the game working for them.
Honestly, it's a feat. Like, this film, took 7 months to film, but like, how many months in post-production? Animation was like over a year to do everything they had to do.
14 months, BK.
Oh my God, I can't. Like, that is a feat. Like, really, just taking a look at the whole film and what it takes. Like, I know we mentioned the animation process, but like, we got to shine a little bit more light on it. Like, all of the props we see moving were all from like the typical like practical effects teams, right? They had to create these machines to be able to hold up items which would be drawn over, right? We couldn't just have people in green screen bodysuits, doing things. That is not what happened here. You know what I'm saying?
It gets even more, finite than that. Like, you go into the Ink and Paint Club scene again. Those little trays that are being carried around by the penguins, those were on wires handled by legit puppeteers because people who had worked with marionettes were the only people who could get these things to move believably as if they were being handled by an actual person. They had a literal plate smashing machine in the bar scene when the record sticks and Roger's smashing plates over his head. Like, they went to so many depths, technically, to get this done. We stressed the story a lot and we've stressed a little bit of the tech stuff. We could almost do a whole nother run through this film just talking about the tech.
Literally.
That's how deep it goes. And a big, big shout out to the special effects artists at Industrial Light and Magic as well, because those are the people who add the extra light layers to the optic compositing and the cell shading to give the tunes the real depth to look as though they were physically inhabiting the world. It was one of the first real triumphs for ILM, which is a firm that is now ubiquitous with visual effects within the industry.
Just to add on, like, that is the lighting that really makes it not only add the depth, but also make it feel like it's within the scene, like taking into account the lighting that the scene with the live action already has. It's matching that up as well. Like, no wonder it took over a year to get the animation alone together. Like, this is why we had to shine a little spotlight on it, because like, this is honestly history books. Like, to not even put it lightly, like, history fucking books. We would not get what we have today if it was not for this film. 110%.
And I got to say one more thing for this, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. It was also really this point at which Amblin Entertainment embarked in its relationship with Warner Brothers. And if it were not for this collaboration, we would not have Tiny Toons, we would not have Animaniacs, and my personal favorite, we would not have Freakazoid. So thank you, WB, for working with Amblin to make sure Disney could use your characters, and thank you for continuing to work with Steven Spielberg. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Cannot thank you enough. Like, my biggest thing from this whole film is really just seeing Warner Brothers and Disney, like, seeing all of the IPs together. Like, when I watched it for my first time, like, I did not know I was going to get that. Like, I had thought and was under the impression that we were going to get a whole new set of tunes, like whatever Roger Rabbit comes from. Like, I know he comes from, some shorts. I thought that's what we were going to get, not to get literally probably the best mashup of our time. Like, I don't think in 2020 we will ever get something with all of these IPs in one work. Like, this is the golden age.
Oh, absolutely not. You were straight bugging when you saw Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse skydiving together.
I couldn't, let alone the Donald Daffy scene. I'm like, I know this cartoon bit. I know what they're doing. I was like, this is amazing. So that for me is really like what's so big and a little bit a part of like the cultural significance behind it, because like we don't often have these mashups anymore in this current day and age. Like, we don't get these collaborations. Like, everyone is so stingy nowadays.
A mashup these days, and I hate to say it, but a mashup these days is just several intellectual properties owned by the same studio coming together.
Totally.
This type of cross studio effort, it may never happen again. Like, it's an unbelievable achievement among unbelievable achievements with this film. And when weighing those achievements, BK, it becomes extremely hard to give this a proper rating. But I'm going to ask you, where do you fall on this? Because I don't know if I'm even sure yet.
See, okay. I have to, it's really hard to not give it a 10 out of 10. But I will comment on overarchingly, I feel like it is a little bit of kiddie. It is a little bit of corny. Some of the effects, like with Doctor Doom at the end, don't hold up, but everything else does. So it's at I don't give 0.5s, but it's a 9.5 for me.
Wow.
If it held up any better, it would be a 10. If it held up any better.
I'm amazed. I did not realize that you had this much of an abiding affection for this film, but I'm so happy to hear that you do. I think I come down with Who Framed Roger Rabbit around an 8.5.
Okay.
I love this film. I have fond childhood memories of it. You mentioned and alluded to it a little bit earlier with some of the cringe. There are some things that don't age well in this film.
Yes.
Like Bob Hoskins, saying ooga booga to a gorilla bouncer that is clearly supposed to be, an African-American character. That's cringe.
Yeah.
Firing a bullet that is dressed up like an Indian brave that literally does the Peter Pan sound effect before hitting the bottle in the sky. That's a little bit cringe. And it's something that you do have to take in context with the history of Disney, is that Disney is notorious in its animated work for having these real moments of very problematic content and animation. And while I totally respect the technical achievements of something like Roger Rabbit, looking at it 32 years later through more educated eyes, through, hearing it through ears that have been able to actually take on collective experiences of other people's and marginalized groups, you do have to worry about that content and you do have to reconcile with it a little bit. And for those reasons, it's hard for me to make any Disney film a 10. But Roger Rabbit at an 8.5, I think is fitting for the way I see it.
Okay. I respect that. I also appreciate you bringing that to light because it is very important to mention that. I am one of the few people who can't help but love it. All right, guys, I grew up in Florida. It's really hard to not Disney things, right? To not really love them. Like, you've got to be literally the Grinch for Disney to have grown up in Florida and not love it.
That's fair.
For me, what made it, and I agree with you, what made it a little bit more, what made it in the 9 range for me is honestly the technical achievement of being the animation head that I am and never seeing a work like this before. It blew my mind. That's why it got the rating. It was like, whoa, like I was not ready for it, regardless of the cringe, regardless of how, outdated some of the moments were. The awe really just stood out for me and brought me into one of these of being like one of my top side picks. Like, I would put this on every once in a while. Like, this is something that, like, if you haven't seen, you've got to see it. Like, it's one of those. Like, you can't just pass this up.
It's valuable to see it. And, in talking about the problems with Disney, this isn't The Crows from Dumbo. This isn't Song from the South.
Thank you.
This isn't, this isn't the Peter Pan song, What Makes the Red Man Red, which makes me cringe just thinking about it. Like, these are the kind of cultural affectations that you would expect people to cast off, and most, for all intents and purposes, have mostly been cast off by studios like Disney in this modern day and age. This problematic stuff is important to notice, and it does detract a little bit. But as we have said throughout this podcast, you are not going to take away from the absolute technical genius of a film like this.
Absolutely. And little sidebar, I wonder if Monsters, Inc. kind of took a little influence from this whole power of laughter thing. Because the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, oh my God, that's where they got the idea from. I guarantee you. So you go back, you watch this. You watch Monster Inc., you tell me there's real people and then there's the world of monsters and they are connected and the power is laughter. Laughter fuels the monster or the toon world. Okay? I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. Gem, boom. There you go, Jack.
You actually gave me one last little historical gem I can drop for people about this. That involves Pixar.
Okay.
Now, after Roger Rabbit came out, there was an attempt to bring back the animated short preceding a film. There were 3 Roger Rabbit spin-offs made that were put on other films that Disney made, but it didn't turn out to be a successful initiative for them. But you know who it was successful for? Was the shorts team working for Pixar. Without Roger Rabbit, those animated shorts would not exist.
Wow. See, there you go. All right, Pixar, I see you, Pixar. I'm about to look up. I bet you have some, animators who were involved. I guarantee you. Like, y'all kind of switched sides there. I'm convinced, Jack. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, man. Well, this has been a fun one to cover because it's a fun film. And it's hard. It's hard to transition, but, when we're talking about the world of Roger Rabbit, we're talking about these disillusioned, disdainful people. That really does kind of sum up the motif of the characters in the next film we're going to be going into, BK. And, we've been talking a lot about doing a Tarantino film. I know that was something in the discussions of season 1 that we were both very interested in discussing. And we could have gone with something like Pulp Fiction. We could have gone with something like Inglourious Basterds or Django, the films that everybody has seen. But I implored you that we would first take a look at the best thing that Quentin Tarantino has ever written in his life. In my humble opinion, that is Jackie Brown.
Woo! I'm so excited. I love it when Jack gives me like gems that I've never seen because I'm always in for the ride. And you know where Tarantino stands here, so it can't be bad. All right, it cannot be bad. That's all I have going into this, guys.
No, and BK, this one is not bad. It is, in so many ways, it is Tarantino's love story to so many things. It is a love story to the pulpy crime novel in a way that Pulp Fiction is, but also kind of isn't. It is a statement of love to Tarantino's love of blaxploitation films. It is also a real poignant statement on love and loss. It's not an anti-Tarantino film by any stretch. It plays out the way you feel like you're in a Tarantino film the entire time, but there is so much more to these characters, to the story, Yes, the script that Tarantino came up with for True Romance is amazing. Yes, Pulp Fiction is well written. Hateful Eight is well written. All of these films Tarantino has done. But Jackie Brown is and has always been to me on a different level. And I think you'll see what I mean. And I will be astonished if you are not in love with Pam Grier in the first 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh, you're getting me amped already. And I hope you guys listening are amped too, because we're going to be coming back at you as a regular schedule as much as possible. And I'm so excited to be able to bring you guys this content. I know, Jack, you're excited to bring everybody it too. Let them know where they can find you, because this isn't all we're doing. We're out here doing what we can. So let them know who's listening where you can check out your stuff, Jack.
Well, speaking of doing what we can, I'm going to break from my usual plugs for a quick second here, because next weekend I am participating in Extra Life with some of my friends from my hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina. The Extra Life does a lot to raise money for the Children's Miracle Network of hospitals, including one that was local to my home was Duke Children's Hospital in the Triangle area. And the donations that we're getting by doing a 24-hour game marathon go directly to helping children. It could be something as small as a toy that goes to them. It can be, a heart monitor for a kid who's going into chemotherapy. But all these donations matter. So look up on the Extra Life page, look up the Gaming After Graduation team. That's who I'm a part of. We have a lofty goal right now that we've actually extended because people, including BK's community, have been so generous in helping us out. So that's what the plug for this episode is going to be, is I'm going to plug that enterprise that we are engaging in. That's on December 12th. Check out the Gaming After Graduation Twitch if you want to watch along with the marathon. But we're going to be raising money for 6 kids, and we are so privileged to have that opportunity, BK.
Fantastic. I've done a lot of work with Extra Life in the past as well. They're a great foundation, great incentive, and great I just keeping it going and not stopping being able to provide for the Children's Miracle Network. So I'm so happy you're doing that, Jack. And you know BK fam supports you 110%. We'll be there watching and cheering you on.
Yes, you will. And where will that family be supporting me from? Is now let's get we've got that charity all important plug. And now let's get those personal plugs in too, because we want to make sure we know how people can join such a giving community as yours.
We are out here on Twitch. We're live Mondays and Wednesdays, as well as on Twitter and Instagram if you want to get a little of the deets. And be sure to join our Discord, where we have our community nights, where we get together for watch parties, where we get to see some of the films that we cover on this podcast. So if you're not involved, let us know. We'll get you hooked up. Please hit us up in the comments. Please hit us up on IG or Twitter. We will respond to you. We love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much. You know, it's BK Black Crystal here, and this is the RFN podcast. You can find us on Twitter, RFN_podcast, or on Instagram at Revenge of the Film Nerds. We would love and appreciate that follow. That is it from me, BK. Thank you, Jack, for joining me. I appreciate you so much every week.
We finally got through a comedy, BK. Knock on wood, we finally got through a comedy.
Yes! Oh my goodness, here's to this. Maybe we should just no comedy season 2. You let us know, guys. Okay, if you like the comedies, we'll do them. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
We'll turn this luck around. But thank you, everybody, so much for listening to us. We hope you have a good day and a safe tomorrow.
That's all right. That was it. Janice, see you next time.